Hey guys, Huz here, bringing you another video. Now this video is just going to be a fairly basic video going over my mastery points. Quite a lot of people have sent me messages going, there's no guides or in any websites right now. I need some help with my masteries. So first and foremost, I will say this is my personal opinion on masteries. This could be subject to change. I am personally doing quite a lot of research into professionals and Korean players, seeing what they're taking, and yeah, I'll be changing mine, so don't think of these being your whole season's masteries, because they will change. Now we go into the first point. We're just going for standard jungle in this approach, so this could be a jungler like Jarvan or something along them lines, and we're taking 9-21-0. One thing I will actually say really quickly, you'll notice a lot of the time the 9-21-0 or 21-9-0, a lot of them have stayed the same in that aspect, where a lot of people thought, maybe you'll go 30 in defense or 30 in offense, a little bit more. But no, you kind of are still mixing it into the right approach. I will say right now that defense is really, really strong, and you'll probably see champions like Vi, etc., go into defense rather than offense as well right now, unless it does get changed a little bit. So working through the mastery pages, I'm not going to go at totally individual a lot. Now I'm going to do my overview of, say, like the jungle one, and I'll give you an overview of every mastery point, and then when I move into mid lane, I'll do the same for mid. But then in the in-between masteries, I won't be going over everything individually, because a lot of it is the same. So working in offense first, taking the 5% cooldown reduction and the 1 in Butcher. This helps you have a little bit faster clear time, and especially on a champion, say like Jarvan, having your EQ combo up more often is a lot more useful than attack speed early on, and I just prefer it a lot more. Then moving into the more attack damage, and then into more bonus attack damage. Now what does this actually mean for junglers like Jarvan? Now this actually means get armor pen runes. And why is that? Well, normally at this point you'd have some armor pen from masteries, but you have none as a jungler with only 9 offense. You get the armor pen further down the line, which obviously if you're going in defense you won't get. So a mixture of armor pen reds, and I'm not saying all armor pen reds, I'm saying about 4 or 5 would actually help you quite early on to have that little bit extra of pen to get in through them ganks early on. So that is it for the offense. Now moving on to the defense. Moving into the enchanted armor. Now this is one that is subject that if you personally want it or not. A lot of people are rather taking into recovery or block, which is still very good. Very good. Block into unyielding is a really, really good mastery point. But I have opted for enchanted armor just for a champion like Jarvan. If I'm jumping in the middle, having that increased resistances may help me a little bit more into the late game. Moving into tough skin, reduces damage obviously, then into bladed armor, which returns the damage into 1% of current health each second. Very good early on, scales better into the early game than the late game, but still I think it's a worth point taking. Veteran Scans into Juggernaut. This has been basically, Juggernaut has been moved from about this point to upward. A fairly nice health boost, not gonna snuff my nose at that. Now hardiness and resistance. Both are very good points, and then below them they have reinforced armor, which is reduced damage taken by crits by 10%, and evasive, which is reducing damage taken by 4% from all area effect magic. Now this is a really good point, I have to add, and I would say it's a situational one. If you're looking at the enemy team thinking, they've got a Rumble or a Kennen, a Vlad, etc., take evasive. And this is what I'm going to point out, is really quickly, moving on to the others, reducing the effectiveness of slows by 10%, and then this one, Tenacious, is increasing resistances for as many people are around you, so great if you're always 5v5 team fighting. But one thing I want to add, if you know that the enemy have a lot of AoE magic damage, all you can do is take that away, take 1 point out of there, put it in evasive, and then put your point back. And that will actually lead you having probably more tankiness in an AoE fight, especially if there's more AP damage. And then the final point is Legendary Guardian, reduces the duration of crowd control effects by 15%. So basically just 15% tenacity that does stack with tenacity items in game. So if you get your 35% from your Mercury Treads or Ancient Golem, plus that it will be 50% of all slows, etc. will not affect you. It will be reduced that time, so it was really, really good. Now other things worth mentioning, Runic Shield is actually pretty damn good, especially really in the support role line. Now we will go into that later on, but it is a good point. And if you're taking a jungler that is still kind of tanky, but could use that little bit of a boost early on, then it is still a good point. So anyway, that is my jungle page. All of these will, I think, be available on LOL King relatively soon if they're not now. So you can either pause the video, copy the page, or change it as you will. Or if it's up on LOL King by the time this video is out, then you'll be able to look there. Moving into my individual pages, now this is my win-sin page. Now I will briefly go over this one in a bit of detail, as it is a lot different than the previous jungle. It's 21 offense, 9 defense, 0 utility, and this is for my junglers such as Lee Sin or Riven, etc. if I am going in like a really all-in jungler. So double-edged sword. Now this is a point that is rather risky to take. It means you do more damage, but you take more damage. I'd say it's more worth it for a melee than a ranged, because as a ranged AD carry, it's a bit risky if you do take this a little bit of extra damage, because a lot of the time that can make the difference of living and surviving. Now Fury, I've got 2 points in Fury and 4 in Sorcery. I'm a big fan of having the cooldown reduction, especially on Lee Sin, so you can kick more often, you can Q more often, etc. But having that attack speed just to help you sustain in the early game is always a good idea. Brute Force into the, just bonus AD, or scale that as much AD as possible. Now, you'll probably wonder, why am I not taking Butcher and Feast? Well, Feast, I would say Feast is not very good. Someone actually did the math, and Feast equates to about 10 minutes of use will equal to 1 potion or something around that, so I don't think Feast is really, really good. It does help you in early sustain, don't get me wrong, but yeah, I kind of stay away from it most of the time. And then Butcher, I don't need to do more damage to minions if I'm taking more attack speed, etc. in there. That will help me also kill champions. And now moving into Executioner, increases damage dealt to champions below 50% by 5%. This is actually a pretty good one for Lee Sin. Having your Execute kick there, more damage, especially at 50% health, chasing people down with your Q, etc. is always nice. I don't take into a dangerous game because having restores 5% health and mana for a jungler is not the greatest idea, because a lot of times you do give kills away, and plus Lee Sin doesn't use mana, so yeah, it's kind of not worth the point for me. Then got Warlord, increases bonus attack damage by 5%. Obviously a really good mastery point there. Then moving into the penetration, which is the armor and magic penetration, which is a bit annoying that you get magic penetration and you're not on an AP, but it is a better mastery point if you're playing like a Nidalee or a Ziggs that I'll move on to later, as that does affect your auto attacks as well. And then the final point into Havoc, which increases your damage dealt by 3%. So that is my Lee Sin page, and then obviously moving into the defense, Enchanted Armor into Tough Skin, Bladed Armor, Veteran Scars, and Juggernaut. Now you could take the Tough Skin and Bladed Armor and put them into Block and Unyielding if you prefer. This is the type of things you have to experiment with, as mentioned at the start of this video. Not everything I'm going to say right now is amazingly perfect. This is just my opinion being a Diamond 2 player. It could be wrong. There could be better options, so that's just one thing you're going to have to look out for. Now moving into the utility jungler slot. Now this is much the same as really, really tanky as, the first page, and this would be working on, say, like a Sejuani, even a Nautilus, a Nasus. I used this page for when I jungled Nasus the other day, and it's pretty good. Just standard again, not going to go over every single point, just go over the different points. Now one thing I do, I take 1 point out of Tenacious, move it into Runic Shield. Now again, if there's a lot of AoE damage, you can move another point out of Tenacious and put it in Evasive if you wish, and then obviously take in the Legendary Guardian, which I think is a must if you're going into 21 defense. Fairly standard page in defense, you can just look through it if you prefer. And then moving into utility, now this does aim for junglers that use mana and is quite, big into mana. So technically you could use this page for a Mumu, but I know a lot of people like having a little bit of early AP on him. But it's a little bit increased movement speed, a little bit of mana regen, increase the range of trinkets cast by 15%. You could move this into more mana regen, but having that extra scout range or thingy with the red trinket is quite a nice thing. Increases the cooldown of summoner spells by 10%, more flashes, smites, etc. Just help you sustain and clear the jungle, and then Runic Affinity will help you keep that mana up in the early game, which I know a lot of the utility jungles do suffer with, so even Maokai could use this page potentially. So that is my utility page, not much there. Now here's my individual pages. We've got a Vi one, and we've got a Olaf page, because Olaf has really come into his own in this patch, which is fairly good because I do like playing Olaf. So this is my Vi page. It's a now 921.0 page, very, very similar to the first page, so I'm not going to go over everything, but I would recommend going a little bit more tanky now, as the defense tree is really, really strong. So what do I take on Vi? I go into the 5% cooldown reduction, into the Brute Force, into the Martial Mastery, then into Butcher, and that is my offense. Just fairly standard. That is pretty much exactly what I did for the Jarvan page, but now it is slightly different. Not much differences, may I add, but a bit different. Got 2 into Tough Skin. I don't take Enchanted Armor because on Vi you don't actually go that much resistances. You are building a little bit of damage. And then into the Block, then into Unyielding, into Veteran Scars, Juggernaut, taking both 3 out of 3 in hardiness and resistances. And I do actually take Evasive straight away because I'm not taking the reduces the effectiveness of slows by 10%, because as a Vi, you can quite easily get on people with your ultimate. You can't be slowed while you're using it, so you don't really need it on Vi. Then Tenacious, and then into Legendary Guardian. It's just my experiment Vi page that I think I saw Odd One use it. I think I changed a couple points, but this is generally Odd One's page for Vi, and it works fairly well. Now going to move into my Bromacia page, which again has hardly changed since the thing before, but it is worth a mention that it is a little bit different. Offense is completely the same, so don't have to mention much in there. And the things that have changed really into the defense is not much. I don't take 3 out of 3 into the magic resistance, as Olaf being Olaf, you tend to run for the AD and you're not going to take that much magic damage. Now I would recommend taking more into magic damage, or magic resist, sorry, if there is a full AP team against you. But the reason I also take reduces the damage taken by critical strikes is, yes, again, you tend to run straight for the AD carry as an Olaf when you're in a teamfight situation, and the AD carry will crit you quite a lot in the late game, so that's kind of why I take that. 10% of critical strikes in the late game is rather a lot. So yeah, that is pretty much the whole reason. Not much else has changed. Then moving into Tenacious and then into Legendary Guardian. So that is the jungle bit, guys. And then we're going to move on to mid now. So I'm just going to pause the video now, or stop the recording, and then I'll move on to mid. So welcome back, guys. We're doing the mid lane now. So we've got 3 mid lane pages available. We've got our standard mid page, we've got an AD mid page, and we've got a utility mid page. So I'll be going all over these 3. Now again, I will say that this is subject to my opinion. Being Diamond 2, it could be different. You could think things are different. And I am always doing my own research to try and make these better, as obviously we're only in the first couple days of this being out. And these could change again. I doubt they will, but they could. So anyway, first and foremost, our standard AD, or our standard mid lane page, sorry. And this could be used for champions like Orianna. It could be used for Ahri, but I tend to go into utility a little bit more on Ahri, but we'll go over it anyway. Offense is double-edged sword. Now, I think this is a relatively risky thing to take, but if you're an aggressive player and you're quite confident, I think it's worth taking. As an AP mid laner, your whole job is killing either your opponent or the enemy AD. And if you've got increased damage, this will help you get your gold. Yes, it does put you more at risk, but I think it's overall worth it if you have the type of play that does complement it. Moving into the 5% cooldown reduction, this stuff is fairly standard, so 5% CDR. Into the AP stuff, don't really need to mention that, just full points in the AP, more AP, and then the AP by 5%. Don't really need to mention that stuff, as it is fairly obvious. Then into Executioner, which will help you just secure kills on your target when they're low health. And then I do take Dangerous Game. Now, I think this is a relatively good point for ADs and mid laners, because a lot of time you are getting the kills as the AP mid or the AD carry. But you can find yourself being quite low health once you've got that kill, and you could still have enemies around you. If you pick up one of them kills, that will give you 5% health and 5% mana straight away, whatever's missing. So if you're really low health, it will give you more than if you're like nearly full. But that is a really good point. I hope you sustain a little bit more. I hope you even pick up other kills, and then if you get another kill, that will top it off even more. So I think it's just a generally good point on an AP mid or AD carry. Arcane Blade hasn't changed, just been called something different. I can't really remember what it was called before, but yeah, it's been called something different now. Just deals a bit of bonus magic damage equal to 5% of your mana with your auto attacks. And then moving into the Devastating Strikes, which is the armor and magic penetration. Now, I have to say, AP mid laners, you guys are really lucky in that Devastating Strikes is the best mastery point for you guys. Obviously, ADs take it, AD mid laners take it as well, but APs use both auto attack, so AD, and they use magic damage with their spells. So getting both of these in one mastery point or 3 mastery points is really, really good for AP mids, and definitely worth it. And then finally into Havoc, which just increases your damage dealt by 3%. Now, Havoc is actually, although it's worth 1 point now, Havoc was actually a tier 2 mastery point, I believe, last season, and it was 3 out of 3 to get it. So they've moved it from like tier 2 or tier 3 all the way to the bottom tier, but just given it 1. I'd say it's worth it now that it only has one, and really you don't have any other options. Now moving into the defense, that is block into unyielding, just reducing that damage dealt will help you a little bit in lane. Then I've got enchanted armor, but this can be subject to change. In case you want to have a little bit more health regen, I'd recommend going into recovery instead of tough skin. But basically enchanted armor will help champions that build Zhonya's or Abyssal, etc., because that will give you extra stats from them items. But if you're not building them items, then I would recommend into recovery. Said about unyielding, now into veteran scars, into juggernaut, which is bonus health that will just help you a little bit, be a bit more tanky. And that is my standard AP page. Nothing really fancy there, just fairly standard. Not much to really add about that. Now moving into the AD mid lane page, that would be used for champions such as Riven, or potentially even Rengar, Jarvan mid lane, Zed, etc., something like that. So we're going again in double-edged sword. Again, for mid laners, your whole job is killing your target, and having more damage, I think, is worth it, even if it makes you a little bit more vulnerable. Then moving into 1% or 1.25 attack speed from Fury. Then moving into 5% cooldown reduction from Sorcery, as the more cooldown reduction you have, even on an AD, means you can jump onto your opponent more often, which I think is just generally worth it. Then moving into Brute Force, into Martial Mastery. Then we've got Executioner into Dangerous Game again. I think it's, as I mentioned, a really good point. Yes, if you're not using mana, it's a bit lame, but I still think it's relatively good just having that little bit of health, especially in the mid lane. Say you get ganked, you kill the enemy mid laner, the jungler's trying to kill you, that 5% may save your life. Then into Warlord, fairly obvious to take that. Then into Devastating Strikes, and then into Havoc with basically the same defense. So all that's changed really from the AP to the AD is we're going down the AD line instead of the AP line. Now moving into the utility mid laner. Now I don't really need to mention the offense again, as it's basically the AP mid laner standard AP page, fairly standard to take all the points, but double-edged sword, sorcery, all into the AP stuff, into the Executioner, Dangerous Game, Arcane Blade, Devastating Strikes, and Havoc, and now into the utility. So I've taken 2% or 2 mastery points, into the Fleet of Foot, which increases your movement speed by 1%. Although it's not a lot, I think it's kind of worth it, as when I play mid lane, I do roam quite a lot. If you're not a mid laner that roams, and I pretty much roam on every mid laner I play, pretty much, then yeah, if you're not someone that roams, then don't take this, as it won't be worth it for you. But if you are mid laner that roams, I think you should. Then into the mana regen, so that will help something like a RE sustain into the early game, maybe even a Karthus if you were to go slightly risky into utility. Then in Summoner's Insight, reduce the cooldown of your Summoner spells by 10%. Always nice onto like an Ari, for example. She's my main example of utility mid laners, simply because you'll have your flash up a little bit more, you'll have your ignite up a little bit more, which will help you just kill your enemy a little bit more. And then into the Runic Affinity, which will help you bring that blue buff out a little bit more into the game. And an Ari with the blue buff is very hard to deal with, and she'll have that for 20% more of the time. So that is the mid lane, guys. I'm going to probably make this into a 2-part series. So that is part 1. Next part, we're going to cover the next 3 roles of top lane, AD, and support. So I'll probably upload that tomorrow. So I hope you guys found this, fairly useful, and I'll see you guys next time.